Right, can everyone see my screen, the presentation? Yep. Ooh, cool. Okay, so Ryan put together a talk track recently around closing in difficult times. And it got me thinking that we're obviously currently in a difficult time, but there's always various difficult times that affect different businesses. The only difference between what kind of goes on day to day and the current situation is obviously the current situation is pretty much impacting the majority of countries in the world, with the exception of maybe parts of Southeast Asia. So what we're going to talk about in this session is a little overview of what difficult times are and can be, and obviously a lot of it's pretty obvious, but some of it may not be. We're going to talk about how we continue selling with empathy in times like this, because customer behavior is going to change as a result of what's going on. We'll talk a little bit about managing yourself in difficult times, because that's particularly important. You know, you're great salespeople, but we're all affected by our mindset sometimes, and you know, you wouldn't be human if you weren't worried about or affected by what's going on currently. We're going to talk about the importance of qualification, because that is the key to selling in difficult times. It's the key to selling anyway, but even more important in times like this. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a small box and a top 2 priority, just to make sure everyone's on the same page with what those mean when the commercial management team talk about them. I'll give you an example of a talk track, and we'll discuss kind of how we can modify it for our different regions. And there's a 101 at the end, but that's more for you to read at the end of the presentation. So please make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me, feel free to jump in, because interaction is what makes these fun, right? Any questions before we dive right in? No? Cool. So a difficult time is anything that's going to impact a company's normal day-to-day operation. Now, there's obvious ones like recessions, global pandemics, for example, but also things that impact one large company can really impact companies further down their supply chain. So as an example, BP had a massive oil spill in 2010, as we all know. Their share price went through the floor as a result, and they had a lot of bad press. The impact on BP was obvious. We could all see it playing out on the news. But when a company is going through rough times, their suppliers are affected, their employees are affected, which has a knock-on effect on other companies. As an example, I once had a customer a few years ago when I was an account manager, whose primary business was supplying to banks. So during the global recession in 2008, they were severely impacted because they would have been okay, but their customer base were not. So it's always good to keep your finger on the pulse with things like this. But this isn't an exhaustive list. If there's anything that you think should be added, let me know. Is that a question coming up? No? Okay. Empathy. We should always sell with empathy, because the one thing you can guarantee in sales is that the person you're selling to is a human being, right? And they have emotions and things like that. But the key thing in times like these is that some of our customers are going to be worried about whether their company is going to survive. Some of our customers have been furloughed. Some of our customers are having to ask for government grants in order to stay afloat. And that has a knock-on effect on people's morale and things like that. And, you know, we will have seen it with what's going on. And it's important that no matter what the outcome of a conversation is, that customer always leaves the conversation feeling like, okay, GitLab understand where I'm coming from. We may disagree on how we move forward. You know, I might not be able to get everything that I would like to get, but you know, they have done the best that they can in the parameters that they've got. Lisa, a lot of calls I've been on with you. You are particularly good at empathy. Other than what's on here, do you have any tips, or is everything on here kind of your modus operandi?
I would say also don't be judgmental. Like, always try to find the answer where the customer is coming from. So instead of maybe you already have the answer, keep having an open mind and you know, try to figure out where their statement is coming from.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Isham?
Yeah, like there's another thing I want to say, like if some companies B2C, like usually like in this COVID-19, the customer facing organizations are the first ones which are facing a lot of impact, not in technology, but in normal life. So we should always be having a bit of information. Okay, this is a company which is already been affected. So that should also be a factor while having conversations, especially with these customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, empathy is something that we should always sell with. I guarantee you'll make far more money selling with empathy than by not selling with empathy. But the key with empathy isn't just saying, "Oh, I understand how you feel" and things like that. It's listening to the customer. It's practicing active listening. It's giving subtle reactions that show that you empathize with them. So, for example, they say, "Do you know what? 70% of our staff have been furloughed," and rather than going, "Okay, yeah, moving on," we say, "How's that impacting you?" And it's a very subtle but powerful way of showing, I understand, I get it, right? We've always got to put ourselves in our customers' shoes. But when we do get the feeling from a customer that the company's not in a great place, we have to probe, and it can feel a little bit uncomfortable because you're basically, it feels like opening up a wound. But it's important because the more you understand about their situation, the better you can help them resolve it. So if a customer says to you, "Some of our staff have been furloughed," or "We're having to watch our costs at the moment," okay, how's that impacting what you're trying to buy? How's that impacting your purchase of GitLab? How's that impacting your purchase of everything else? How are you prioritizing? And that way you get information that's going to help not only you, but the customer as well. And a number one rule of selling with empathy is don't try and spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's never a good strategy anyway, but it's definitely not the time or the place during difficult times, and we don't need to. So heads up on that. Any questions before we move on? I was an account manager during the global recession in 2008. And initially, I struggled with it quite a lot. I was obviously a lot younger then. But what the situation taught me was actually my outlook on the whole situation was what was causing me to have a bad time, not necessarily the situation itself, if that makes sense. Whenever there's a change, we go through the change curve, right? And Kubler-Ross is the kind of the gold standard of the change curve model. You start off in shock, denial, you know, "Oh yeah, that's not going to affect me. No, it's fine. You know, it's all going to blow over." If you remember at the beginning of COVID-19, people were saying, oh, it's just like the flu, it's fine, it's not going to impact us. And then you start to move into frustration, you start getting annoyed and little things start to get on your nerves. We've all been there, it happens. Then you start to feel low. Oh, am I ever going to hit my target? Oh, customers are delaying orders. Oh, it's annoying, right? But then once you come out of that and you start, the kind of brain fog clears and you start thinking, okay, how can I make the best of this? How can I help our customers through this situation and help GitLab at the same time? You all know that, but having the change curve, at least in your brain, is really important, because next time you're getting annoyed at little things that probably wouldn't annoy you, you can think to yourself, actually, do you know what? I'm probably just reacting as exactly a human will react. But on a serious note, mindset is a really, really important thing in any performer, sales or otherwise. You've got to look after yourselves. That's so, so, so important. If that means you need to take an hour out to go and talk to your family or just do some exercise or chill out, do it, because the better mindset that you're in as a sales rep, the better service you can offer to customers, and the better deals that you can do with them. Has anyone not seen the change curve before? Is this new for anyone? No? Okay, good. Always keep it in your mind. Always. Your mindset is by far the most important thing, and I can't overstate that enough. So this slide I've lifted from the handbook in the enablement section. How many times have we heard Smallbox or top 2 priority? Bill, you've been here the longest.
A lot. We hear this a lot.
Yeah. Ross and Bastian as fairly new hires, have you heard it a lot?
No, I have to admit no.
No?
Yeah, no, me neither. Not so much.
Okay. This is why I wanted to include it on here. So Smallbox is, think of it like a Band-Aid or a plaster, depending on what region you're in. It's a solution that fixes an immediate problem. So, oh, we've bought GitLab Starter, we've got Jira, we need to integrate it, our current method isn't working, okay, let's upgrade to Premium. That would be a Smallbox opportunity. Whereas a top 2 is, it's an initiative that the company is working on. For example, we need to consolidate our DevOps toolchain because we're spending a huge amount of time and money trying to fix this. That would be a top 2 priority. So the reason I mention that is that all of our qualification, every last bit of it, should lead us to be able to determine, is this a Smallbox sale or a top 2 priority? Because that will help determine whether they're likely to still buy GitLab even when times are tough. So, for example, there are things that GitLab as a company will still buy even in difficult times like this because we need it. And if we don't need it, we're going to deprioritize it. So we have to ask very, very direct but empathetic questions. Lisa, could you give us an example of a question that can help us determine whether an opportunity is a Smallbox or a top 2 priority for the customer?
Oh, I need to think about that one.
I'll put across. So like one thing is, let's say there's a core customer and who's looking to buy Ultimate or Gold, and he's not paying, and there's a huge amount of cost involved. That could be something of a big priority in the organization. So that's a top 2 priority. And top one would be there's a core customer using right now, and suddenly with the COVID-19, they realize, hey, we need to have merge approvals in place because everyone is working from home. So we just want to upgrade to startup. So that would be something like a Smallbox opportunity. Or in other words, like usually the way I look at it is top two priority is something a business making a big change. The buyer who is not aware about GitLab as a product for a long amount of time, he's just making a change of products or replacing some things. So that would be a top two priority in overview. I would say bird's eye view. But yeah, usually Smallbox are where people are already our users and they want to buy something because of a particular reason. And that's very clear to them.
Bastian, were you going to mention something?
Yeah, I think also the kind of who's your contact person in that opportunity, how high in the organization, if it's just a DevOps engineer, or if you're talking more like on strategic level, that probably the higher you are in the organization, the higher the chance it's a top two priority or initiative.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually, and also the kind of more the more senior someone is, the more involved they're going to be in the day-to-day runnings of the company. So the more certain we can be that if they say it's a top two priority, that it definitely is, because they've got their eyes absolutely everywhere. One of the kind of killer questions, once you've determined whether it's a Smallbox or top two priority, is to just ask outright, is the current global situation, whether that's COVID-19 or a future situation that's either impacting the whole world or that customer's industry or that country or whatever, ask them outright, is it going to impact you? Is it going to impact you buying this? And a lot of salespeople, we like to hear good news and we like to avoid bad news. In fact, I'll send you all a link to the psychological theory around that later. So sometimes we avoid asking a question if we're not entirely sure that we're going to like the answer. We all do it. I do it. I have to stop myself doing it because I know I'm doing it. But don't be afraid to. Because it's better to know that something's definitely not going to come in within a particular time scale than to cross your fingers and really hope it comes in. Really hope. What other questions could we ask?
I just put one in the chat, but I was wondering, like, one of the things, like, hey, is this a team initiative or is it part of a wider organization, like the whole conversation? I think that really determines, is just that a developer who wants to make a change feature-wise, or is it really a strategy what the company is doing? I always think like the smaller the project, the quicker the decision will be made because less people are involved. So that could also be, a good question to ask.
Yeah, that's right. Although that's a really good question, and I'm thinking out loud here, and I'd want feedback from you all on this. If someone says that it's a wider organization conversation, do you feel that makes it more likely that it's a top two priority?
No, I don't think so. But you do know more about the power of the people who are going to make the how do you say it? If you know that your point of contact is a developer and he's not the decision maker, you know that you need to dig more into the company. Okay, it's a wider initiative from the company. Then I also need to speak with the people from the company to determine and find out if this is the number one priority in the company. Maybe it's the second or the third priority. It is a priority, but you want to find out if it's also their number one priority.
Yeah, great point. Ishan, did you have anything to add? So you took yourself off mute.
Nothing.
No, cool.
Yeah, maybe question, would that differ in theory between SMB, mid-market, and large accounts, what would qualify as a top 2 priority? If we're talking like a 10-person business, pretty much every decision is probably a priority, or in theory. What do you think?
Well, I do think it's depending, because I lost a deal, for example. I was working on a deal for a couple of weeks, even 1 or 2 months. And then in the end, it was around December, he just emailed me, and it was an SMB customer saying like, no, oh, we have the green light on our top priority project, so you are on hold. So it's also, it's also coming in SMB companies.
No, my line of, yeah, because we hear a lot, or I hear a lot, cost considerations, and it's a big investment for small companies, etc. So if it's eating a lot of budget for small companies, is that fact already enough to define it a top 2 priority?
So I think whenever you get this objection, like it's too big investment, I bet that's a small box opportunity you are working on.
Yeah, good point.
It's top 2 priority. There are different patterns leading to that. Like they are releasing new product, they are building new team, and they are looking how to improve the process for that new team or product or whatever. Whereas in Smallbox, well, when I'm thinking through my past opportunities, Smallbox always gets down to feature selling, whether that's migration, whether that's upgrade. It's always about feature selling.
Good point.
Yeah, and the best part with the Smallbox opportunities, like the way Bill had said, like regarding the features, is you can always have a good conversation and make them make a good decision. Like sometimes people are looking at premium a lot, but you can close them at starter very easily if you are able to drill down in conversations very early. Like, why do you need this? Is it very important? Something like these kind of questions as a series. So in such difficult times, like, we should try to push them to buy something lower cost so as to make a decision faster, and actually that saves cost also. So that's where, like, sometimes people say, hey, yeah, you are saying, you're making sense, starter can make our life easier right now, and you can say, you will save a lot of money also. There's no need for making a big purchase right now. Try to sell a starter right now. So that's always a good approach, especially with Smallbox.
Yeah, and you know what, that kind of leads us on to the latter parts of the presentation, of the training. What Ishan's just said is absolutely right. We should always sell the customer the kind of minimum, what they need, almost like an MVC for sales, because once they're a customer, then we can then work on a plan to upgrade them depending on what their company is planning to do over the next 1 to 2 years. And in times like these, like Ishan said, that is so important, and it's very powerful as well. That's showing empathy. Hey, we know things are difficult. We know you need these features in premium, but why don't you just get started with starter first? And then once the dust has settled and you're in a better position, then we can look at the other features that will help take your business even further. That kind of thing. So thank you, everyone, for your inputs. So here's an example talk track. But before I carry on, just warning for everyone, my cat is in the room, so may start meowing. Won't obviously go through this in detail, but there's some key themes running through this. So Ryan wrote it, so I encourage you all to have a look at it, think how it might translate into the different languages that you sell into, but also how you can adapt it for the different cultures that you sell into. But it's a very kind of powerful talk track, and the thing that comes across in all of this is the rapport. That's the most important thing. The key thing is that we need to show a lot of empathy, and we just need to continually ask the customer, how is everything going? is there anything that could stop you doing this? That's going to be particularly powerful. Looking at this talk track, is there anything that stands out for you, things that you think, do you know what, I haven't actually tried that, and I think that could be quite powerful, or it could be very powerful if I you know, put it into the relevant language?
I do already think, like, for example, the second part, so 1B, like before we jump into the call with agenda and deck share, it doesn't feel really natural with me. I would first say, like, okay, it's great to see everybody. First of all, how are things going? Instead of directly going straight to business and then asking how it's going, I would just rather say, like, hey, you know, we're on the call, like, how's everybody doing?
So this is a formatting issue in the presentation. I was meant to say that this is the same talk track. It isn't two separate ones. So the beginning, you would ask, so this is actually 5B rather than 1B, but yeah, Google Slides doesn't format it correctly, so apologies for that. However, you do make a very good point, Lisa, that we can't just pounce on them and be like, hi, how are things going? Yeah, great. Right, any priorities that might mean you won't buy GitLab? Like, they're going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, that's not the approach we want to take. Bastian?
Good to think of scenarios how a conversation flow could go to be prepared for it. So I think that's the main lesson for me, to kind of see what the outcome should be, and then steer the conversation in a way to achieve that.
Yeah. As I said, I'll give you, obviously you'll have the slide deck afterwards, so have a read through it, think how it can work in your regions and your language, and obviously take into account the different cultures that you're talking to as well. But I thought this was a really good, solid talk track to work from. Okay, final part, 101. Qualification is even more important. We can't take shortcuts. We have to clarify how important this is. We have to test the timescales. We have to test our champion to make sure that we can forecast it and help the customer in a better way. Always start with empathy, but obviously even more so now. Don't be afraid to ask upfront direct questions. A lot of things are up in the air, so we can't assume what a customer is or isn't going to do. I know I don't have to tell you all this, but FYI, we should never try and create urgency through fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's not a positive way to sell. It's not the way GitLab does things. We create urgency by looking at the impact on our customers' business and how quickly they can realize that impact if they go ahead. But as I said, most importantly, look after yourself. If the situation is getting you down, if you're looking after the kids, if you're having to support family members, things like that, or you just hate being stuck indoors, you know, you've always got options. I'm always available to talk. We've got the GitLab employee assistance program, and it's completely free and anonymous, so definitely take advantage of that. But always make sure you keep in check of your own emotions, because it's really easy for us not to do that when we're busy, but it is so important, even if it means you have to take some time out of work for a bit. And that is the end of this session, so I'm going to stop recording now.